so. I came back in those days, when the war was on in 1944. You rode the train. I rode the train from Texas to Seattle. I got a ship in Seattle. The Alaska shipping lines back in those days, the only ones who ran any ships up here except some army barges and things. And came to Seward. Wasn't any road between Anchorage and Seward in those days, so I rode a train from Seward to Anchorage. Came here, looked around, and it wasn't hard to find some work to do. We're building a lot of military bases up in Alaska, and at that time they were building what is presently Elmendorf Air Force Base. Back in those days there wasn't any Air Force. There was an Army Air Corps. So Fort Richardson and the Elmendorf Air Force Base were one, and it was just the Army Air Corps out there attached to the Army. So we actually had an Army base with the Air Corps. They had need of workers. The military plants, the people producing military equipment down in the States were hiring everybody that was loose. Anybody who wanted to work here could certainly work. There wasn't any question about it. And I went to work out at Elmendorf Air Force Base. Shortly thereafter, Bill Petty resigned from the church. In the meantime, in the church, there had come some people who didn't know anything about Southern Baptists, and Captain Carl D. Mott, who didn't know anything about Southern Baptists, had sort of led them away. And I found about 25 to 35 people there in the church, a conglomerate of folks, some of them non-denominational, some of them interdenominational, some of them Baptist, and there wasn't over 4 or 5 people in the entire church who knew anything about Southern Baptists at all. Now, Oliver Halsell had tried to get the Foreign Mission Board to come up here, but they couldn't help, they said, because this was part of the United States. It was a territory of the United States. The Home Mission Board said they couldn't come unless the Executive Board of the Southern Baptist Convention would grant them permission. Now, the Executive Board of the Southern Baptist Convention back in those days, I think the majority of them thought that you couldn't build a Baptist church on any soil that wouldn't grow cotton. And they wouldn't even think about or talk about coming to Alaska. They were working through and with and in cooperation with the Home Mission Society of what was then the Northern Baptist Convention, which is presently the American Baptist Convention. The church asked me to come and preach for them, and I preached for them for a good long while. They wanted to call me as pastor, but I didn't want to be the pastor of anything but a Baptist church, but I served as supply for them for several months. In the meantime, we were sending some mission money through the Texas General Convention, and they accepted us as sort of a third cousin partnership with them. They even agreed to set up a program where we could pay our retirement fund into the Relief and Annuity Board through the Texas Convention. So we had a relationship with the Texas General Convention. back in those days. In the meantime, little by little, I had begun to make a Southern Baptist church out of it. I thought, changing here a thing and there a thing, some other place, something, to try to conform to Baptist doctrine and Baptist theology. We started building the church in 1945 on the vacant lot next to the little house we were using for church. And late in the fall of 1945, we did get in the basement area of that building. We set a goal of 50 in Sunday school. And after a while, we had reached that goal. In the meantime, we had put up the outside walls and the roof on the top portion above the basement of the building. It was just a little building, and it'd seat, I would say, around 200 people when we finished it. Maybe if you jammed them real hard, 225 people. It wasn't a very large building. And building material was hard to come by back in those days because everybody was building everything. But we got the building going. Actually, we started it late 44. We didn't get into the basement until up into 45. Then we set a goal of 100 in Sunday school, and we reached our goal and began to grow. Before long, we had that building full of people. And inasmuch as we got the building full of people, I wrote out a 14-point program and asked the church to adopt it. Now, these 14 points would make a Southern Baptist church out of that church. I mentioned one or two of them, that we would use Sunday school literature from the Southern Baptist Convention. We would have 2 study courses a year for our Sunday school work. That we would have 2 revivals a year and major on evangelism all the rest of the year. That we would practice close communion. We would not accept any alien baptism. That we would have a unified church budget. Now, prior to that, this Sunday school class had a treasurer, and this WMU had a treasurer, and everybody in every organization in the church had their own funds. And I knew that that would never work, so we adopted a unified plan that all the money in every organization would go through the church treasury. We had quite a hassle in a business meeting when I presented that for the adoption of the church, but the church adopted it. When the church adopted it, I lost a lot of people right off the bat. I mean, they walked out that night. They resigned and walked out that night. Church treasurer, church Sunday school superintendent, the pianist, and we had a few people who just got up and walked out of the meeting that night. Now, you would think that was bad. It isn't bad to lose people who are not in harmony with the purposes of a church and who do not understand New Testament theology. Just to add a little bit here, I think one of the greatest mistakes a Baptist church can make is to begin to compromise their theology. This didn't hurt at all. They thought it was going to ruin the church. I lost 2 guys who claimed to be Baptist deacons. But from that moment on, the church began to grow and develop. And it has grown and grown and grown and grown down through the years until we finally built the most beautiful, finest church building in Alaska. And back a few years ago, the First Baptist Church was the most prominent church in all of Alaska. Governor Ernest Greene wrote me a letter one time and said, "You and the First Baptist Church has made a greater contribution to the spiritual and moral atmosphere of Alaska of any other group that has ever come here." So I thought that was a real compliment to our people down in that church and their dedication and their influence on Alaska.